Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here. I want to thank the organizers for putting this together and for giving me the opportunity to share a topic I think that's already very familiar to all of us. Russia and your neighbor China are the two countries that have always been concerned with one thing, which is the population is getting smaller. And what I want to do today is to focus on three questions. One is where we are in terms of global population. And second, how did we get here? And I think most of you are probably already familiar with what I'm going to say. But the third is I want to explore with you together is how do we face this new era of a global demographic shift. For all of us in this auditorium, we are fortunate to live through two eras of global demographic change. First, in the last century, especially the second half of last century, we saw unprecedented population growth in the world, right? And half century ago, in the 1970s, 60s, the world population was growing at about 2% per year. That means every 30-some years, the world population size doubles, right? So we were all very obsessed with the global population explosion, population bomb. For one reason or the other, humanity has diffused that bomb. So now, to our surprise, we are entering a second phase where many of us, not everyone in this room, I will not be able to see it, we're going to see the whole world is getting smaller, right? So this has come to a lot of our surprises, that not just Russia, not just Japan, but much of the world is going through population decline and through population aging. The world will be much smaller, right? The growth rate now is less than 1%, which means if it continues like this, the world population can still double in 70 years. However, that's not going to happen. As Mr. Orichkin talked about this morning, the peaking time is going to be any time between the last quarter of the century or as soon as the middle of the century, right? So that means the population growth rate will be 0. And from that point, it's not going to stay at that point. It is going to go down. This change has come much faster and unexpected. So here you see the projection put out by the most authoritative agency that specializes in population projection. That is the United Nations Population Division. So every 2 years, it produces a set of what's called the World Population Prospects, okay? So in the last 4 times, only in 7 years, since 2017, every time they came out with a projection, the peaking time is earlier, and then the peaking size is much smaller. Okay, so between the 7 years, in the 4 projections, the peaking size of the world population projected by the United Nations is shrunk by 1 billion. Okay, shrunk by 1 billion. And if we believe in the projection presented this morning, it could be more than 1 billion. So the population will not peak at 10 billion. It could be 9 billion. Okay. Again, as I said, it's not going to stop there, but it's going to continue, right? So the majority of the world population now are living in countries which what we call below replacement fertility. That is, they are not able to reproduce their original size. Aside from wars, famines, and the pandemics, this would be the first time in human history that we're getting smaller. Population is getting smaller, right? So how did we get here? It's a happy story. We got here not because more people are going to die early, it's because of the longevity. So here we have, again, from the United Nations estimates of life expectancy in the last 70 years, right? And for the whole world, life expectancy gained more than 25 years, right? And people oftentimes point to Africa, saying Africa is the continent where we're going to have rapid population growth. It's going to have a much larger share. But look at this. In the last 20 years, especially after 2000, life expectancy in Africa increased substantially, right? And so half of all the gains in the last 70 years occurred in the last 20 years. Now, this has implications for what we see next. The real reason for population decline, for population aging, is not because we live much longer. That has some impact, but the main reason is we have fewer children. Excuse me. So again, worldwide, this is probably not new to you. We saw this early in the morning. Fertility dropped from the blue line, from 5 in 1950 on average. Women we expect to have 5 children, and to only 2 now. Okay, and for a few examples, for East Asia, that region has one of the lowest fertility regions in the world. It's only 1.3. Okay, that's more than 25% less than the replacement level. And what's interesting, again, is to look at Africa. Africa, the whole continent as a whole, had high fertility of more than 6. But look at what happened in the last 30 years. So the fertility in Africa is also declining, and especially in the last 20 years. Why? Because as in every other places in the world, health improved. Infant and child mortality dropped. Life expectancy increased. When infant and child mortality declines, and people have fewer births. Okay? So, in other words, the so-called demographic transition we have seen in other parts of the world is also taking place in Africa. So, we will not be surprised that as health continues to improve, fertility in Africa would also drop. Again, Africa is not one place. It has many different countries. Northern Africa, South Africa already have very low fertility, but other parts are catching up. And with the investment in infant and child health from all over the world in the last half century, and that is showing up in fertility decline in Africa as well. This decline is not just demographic. It's just not making our population age structure older. it's making revolutionary changes in our lives. Okay. American economist, demographer Ronald Lee did a simple calculation for the implications of fertility decline to people's lives. Okay. So here I say it's from 70 to 14. What does that mean? When women on average were having 5 births in their lifetime, they spend 70% of their primary age life in getting pregnant, having children, raising children is 70% of their adult life. When that number drops to 2, the amount of adult life spent on childbearing and child rearing is reduced to 14%. Okay, so this has revolutionary impact, especially for women, for education and for participation in labor force and contribution outside of the family, right? So we got to this point of population decline, of population aging, because we're living longer, because we're having fewer children. They are both good things for individuals, but collectively, they present challenges we had not seen before. Okay. I will pass this given the time constraint, but basically, you look at the bottom lines, those are China, East Asia, West Europe, Russia specifically. They all converged to very low fertility of about 1.5. Okay. Why is fertility so low? Here I use East Asia as an example. I'm sure it's the same thing here in Russia and in other parts. And that is the rapid change among the share of women who are not getting married. Okay. So we have Japan, South Korea, and urban China. You see the increase, okay? And then you see that's in late 20s, okay? So in South Korea, for instance, in 1980, 15% were not married. So that means 85% of women in their late 20s were already married. Now it's 70% unmarried, okay? And then look at childbearing. We're looking at age 30, 34, 35% and 30% in South Korea and Japan are not married. Now the champion for late marriage in East Asia is Taiwan. So in Taiwan, we're looking at half of women, 49.7%, in the early 30s are not married. So in other words, if they stay unmarried, half of the women in Taiwan would not get married at all. Here's the thing. In East Asia, all 3 countries, there's almost no children, no birth out of marriage, out of wedlock. So when 50% of women are not getting married, that means 50% of women are not going to have children. Okay. Now, this is not just Taiwan. If you look at the trend in these other East Asian societies, they're all moving in the one direction and moving very fast. Okay. So why are people are giving up marriage and childbearing? The list is long. I think there's been discussed. Unlike AI and other things that most of us are just learning, these things are not new, right? From high cost of living, especially housing, education, especially in East Asia, that's highly competitive, and work-life balance. This is a major issue I want to talk about later on, related to gender inequality. So there's a long list of factors we're all familiar for putting people not getting married. Okay. Here's the thing. Governments especially here in Russia, you know, the incentive and the fertility goals in Japan and in China, but the country that made the most effort is South Korea. South Korea, I think, not the latest number, just a few years ago, already spent $20 billion US through 3 5-year plans to boost birth rate. Guess what is South Korea's birth rate? Fertility. It's the lowest in the world, 0.7. So this is what happened after different countries, governments launched incentive programs, okay? So the purple line is Japan. It's made no effect, and then it's dropping. And Russia, you probably know this, had a little rebound, and then started to drop. And China is the worst, that since they lifted the one-child policy, pushed out the 2 and the 3 children policy, fertility dropped to only 1.0. And in South Korea, it didn't work. So why? What should we do? We'll get back to this later on. And then this shift not only is unexpected, it's faster than we expected, but also it's serious, right? So there are different scenarios of how serious this could be. I gave you a few examples here. For these 3 East Asian countries, their population could be reduced by half by the end of the century, if not earlier. Okay. And it's not just become so much smaller, it's 50% of the size now, but also they'll be so much older. Okay. And so by the middle of this century, that is 30 years from now, the top 3 examples I gave here, West Europe, China, and Russia, would all have their median population age of about 50. What that means is half of the population will be above the age of 50. Okay? Half of the population will be age 50 and over. And this is going to happen. Okay, this is going to happen for sure, and happen very shortly. So that seems to be the concerns that many policymakers, opinion leaders are focused on, that we're getting older population, we're getting a smaller population, but what we neglected is a population that is very different in terms of potential for innovation, high productivity, and a more fulfilling life. Here is one indicator. That is for women attending college, the share of women attending college. Now, Russia has always had a high share of population, women in higher education, and that is the orange line on the top. It's about over 80%. And South Korea is the one that is the highest, rose very high. But look at China, and look at Japan. Japan. It's all 60 and above. So we have the most educated population ever in human history. Here I'm looking at the women because women in general are more disadvantaged than men, right? And here I'm looking at tertiary education, of higher education, and then when you look at middle school, look at lower level of literacy, it's even better. So we're looking at really a population, not just the size, but who they are. Another important factor we have to appreciate is how long people live. Not just they live long, but at age 60, how many more years do they have, right? So here we have examples of countries with life expectancy. This is from 1950, 2020. We have a comparison. So a 60-year-old person now has an average about 20 to 25 years to live. So working life can be so much longer, right? So we not only look at the health, the most educated, but also the healthiest population ever in human history. A number of years ago, I participated in a thought group on implications of population aging, and that was organized by the Boston Consulting Group, the Henderson Institute, and this is what they came up. So here's what do we do, right? When we look at population aging, initially we look at a lot of negative concerns, right? Reduced consumption, labor supply, pressure on social security system, caregiving, inequality, and isolation. So these are not new. So I think we have all heard about this purple list of worries. But let's look at possibilities. Let's look at the green side, right? I won't have time to go through each of them, but there are many opportunities for silver economy, right? That is actually itself, it's a large topic because it's not just more consumption power, more tourism, but also extended longer working life, right? And new roles for the elderly and new technology, and also what's called a non-sequential model of life. That means that people can have education, relearning after work, after retirement. So we need to have a new way of thinking about economics and the values. So there are many new possibilities that open up. So we'll talk about this more later. So in other words, given that the train has already left the station, and we're not going to be able to put it back, for us, it's to look at who we are, the most educated, the healthiest generations ever in human history, and think about adaptation. Here I gave one quick example of China. That is how demographic dividend can be achieved. Here are three earning curves of the fixed price level for 2002 to 2018 for Chinese workers. And what do we see here is not just the level that's increased, but notice the peak. It moved to very young and then now gradually moved to the middle. What this means is that the migrants and then the university-educated young people benefited from this economic boom, which is made possible by the institutional changes in China that allow them to be gainfully employed and then also increasing their income very quickly. So the peak age is it's quite interesting because normally in a mature economy, it should be the bottom one, right? Wage does not peak so early, but this is what happened in China. And as a result, this is a little technically tedious, but I'll make it very simple. This is what's called the life cycle surplus, okay, or deficit. So we're looking at the peak throughout the life cycle. We began as dependent, so it's the deficit, right? We spend more than we earn because people don't earn. And the same thing at old age. But look at the middle part. So because of the demographic dividend, on the per capita level, there's so much surplus now for each person. Now, given the time constraint, I won't go into the effect of demographic change. Actually, it's not good because China will not have as many people in the middle, and you're going to have more people toward the end. So even though at the individual level, we've seen the tremendous increase, at the aggregate level, population aging is going to impose a pressure to balance this, what's called the life cycle economy. This open dialogue forum focuses a lot on technology, on platform work. So these are the photos I took 20 years apart. So in early 2000s, Chinese workers were working in the left hand side. So these were workers making shoes and making textile materials. And that's the picture I took 2 years ago in China. The workers now are working for robotics, for logistics, and 2 persons in that big warehouse can do the work used to be done by 24 people. So this is the question that people are asking, I think this morning or later on, whether with new technology we can address some of the concerns of labor force shortage. The answer is definitely yes. When you move from making shoes by hand to using robots for warehouse and logistics, and you see a totally different productivity. We can, as human societies, we can do better, right? And think about the things that we've done to adapt to population growth and to adapt to social change. 200 years ago, when the Industrial Revolution was happening, children as young as 6 or 9 were working in the factories. You go to Manchester, you see how, because of the narrow lanes, aisles for the machines, the rooms, and they actually use children, right? We banned children labor, child labor, right? And now we only work for 4 days a week, 5 days a week. What if we only work for 4 days? Would that help with having children, spending time with child? Think about that, right? And so we have moved from no vacation to 5 days. If productivity can be increased so much, why can't we do only 4 days a week? So that's not too much of stress, right? Think about education. There was no such a thing called public school. No such a thing called university education. Now we have that, right? Think about public medical services. Well, I come from a country, I live in the United States, where tens of millions of people don't have health insurance. But that's not the case in much of the rest of the world with high income, right? So public health care is possible, and that's also a human innovation, right? Adaptation. And we can think of a lot of things. Social Security, right? That's not always there with us. So with the population aging, with this new labor force, with new population, I'm confident we'll be able to have new innovations and new institutions to support this. It's not easy. One point I want to highlight here is social inequality. That includes especially gender inequality and also intergenerational inequality. We have other types of inequality as well, but I want to highlight these two. To give you one example, I don't know whether this has ever come to your attention before. 6 years ago, COVID-19 broke out, right? It lasted for almost 3 years. So the initial response was to, for many places, was to stay home and lock down. And this happened with a Japanese couple there, that couple. The husband, who used to go out to work, was working at home and realized that he had to do a lot of child caring and household work. So he posted his chores. He said, I have to do all these kind of things. So he listed 21, okay? And then his wife also drew a list of what she needed to do. And that included 210 different chores, right? So this couple, the gentleman, put it on Twitter. It was not called X yet. So just shows that it's an example of gender inequality, not just in the workplace, but at home, right? Japan is different from Russia, from other parts of the world, and women do a lot more household work, right? And that is why I think marriage is so low. But this is just one funny example of the list of that's his wife's number 1 list, number 2 list, and that's his own list, right? So it's so much shorter. Okay. And to reduce gender inequality is not easy, and it's not just in the workplace, right? This is just one example. The other one, I think, I don't see too many young people here, very young. I mean, you're all young compared with me. It's intergenerational inequality. Here I use one example by the work of American scholar who used American census data over time and plotted over time at age, I think it's 30, and how their income compared with their parents' income at the same age. And you can see up until 1990, the younger generations were earning more than their parents, okay? After 1990, the younger people, the line is 100%. At the same age, were making less than their parents. This is not just in the United States. Okay. It's in Japan, it's in South Korea, it's in Taiwan, and soon will be in China as well, because China just had this booming generation, right? And when economic growth slows down, young people feel the pressure, right? So how can we redistribute from the wealthier, the parents' generation, to the younger generation? And if we do not address these two issues, gender inequality and intergenerational inequality, it's very unlikely the young people can and will be willing to have more children, right? So these are just two examples. Addressing population aging, I think in terms of social adaptation, I'm an optimist. I think we will have, we're already seeing a lot of adaptations with technology, with ground up innovations, right? So I'm positive, optimistic on that. But I would, if I were a politician, I would be very concerned with how the government would be able to meet the needs of pension and health care of the population. Here I give one example. That's a study we did for China. Okay, so the social spending combined for healthcare, pension, and education as a share of GDP has been going up pretty quickly from 10% to I think now probably 15%, just in a matter of 10 years. And given population aging alone, that share would increase to about a quarter of GDP, of China's GDP, by 2050. Okay, that's the lower line, 23%, but that's very conservative because pension and healthcare expenditure in China, public health, is still quite segmented. That is, some people are getting very good benefits, but others are getting very inadequate benefits. So if China were to raise the benefits level of those less fortunate, which is probably a political mandate because China is now an upper high income society. And if China models that with OECD countries, okay, and what that means is that in about 10 years, by 2035, a quarter of China's GDP would have to be spent on these social benefits. What does that mean? China right now, the government expenditure is about 25 or 30% of GDP. So unless the government increases tax, or its revenue would have to be spent on social support. And it's not easy to raise taxes. And so what would China do? Now, this is not only an issue for China. For all countries in the world, aging societies, this is an issue that would question the political legitimacy of the government, because people need to be supported one way or the other in old age, right? So this is a big question, a challenge for politicians, for governments. So to conclude, I think we have a lot of social potential, human potential, to face this new demographic era, but it is a political challenge to our government. Thank you very much.
Большое спасибо. У нас есть немного времени, поэтому если вы не возражаете, if it's okay, 1-2 questions for you.
We have 2
Okay.
minutes. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Hold on, let me put on this one.
Just a second, please. A second.
Во всем в мире существует баланс. Ну, например, известная в Китае формула инь-янь. Да? И в том числе и в демографии должен быть баланс. И вот я нигде не встречал цифр, которые отвечают на вопрос, а сколько населения должно быть в Китае. Не то, сколько сейчас там есть, не то, какие там тенденции, а если этот процесс управляемый, то должна быть какая-то модель, какое-то цифровое значение, сколько хорошо. Потому что в былые времена правительство Китая считало, что много населения плохо, и действовало. Сейчас все говорят, вот рождаемость снизилась, и это как бы плохо. А сколько должно быть? Вот этих цифр вообще нигде нет. Вот что китайские демографы думают по этому поводу?
Great question. How many people? What's the size? And it depends on the reference. Reference to what, right? 45 years ago or 40 years ago, when China launched the one-child policy, the concern was not enough food, not enough resources, and then would destroy the Chinese environment. And now China has 400 million more people than 40 years ago. People are eating better, and more trees are replanted. And the concern for China is not enough consumers, not enough demand. So 40 years ago, 50 years ago, there was a lot of academic research on what's called the optimum population. It turns out it's a not solvable question. And so we've learned, I think in the case of China and elsewhere, it's not just population. Population is an important parameter, and it affects everything, but it's not everything. So in the case of China, it's really the institutional reforms, changes, and they made people to be from burden to resources.
Спасибо большое. Да, давайте вот здесь мужчина был одним из первых.
Hello, my name is Konstantin. Thank you very much for your very interesting speech and story. Let me ask you, do you believe that such a Bilderberg group, you know, of rich bankers, aristocrats, they're thinking about how to reduce the population, inventing LGBT, homosexuality, diseases, and many, many different things. Do you think it's true that there is some group which wants to reduce the population of the world? Переведу вопрос. Вы считаете ли правым, что существующая группа, Билдербергская группа, которая принимает решения в закрытом формате, продумает варианты о том, как популяризировать гомосексуализм, ЛГБТ, чипировать людей и запускать разного рода заболевания типа ковида?
Okay, thank you. Let me try to clarify, understand your question. Hold on. Give microphone. Okay.
Yes, of course.
Are you referring the bureaucrats or the business people? They want to reduce certain group of population?
Yes, it's actually in mass media that there is some decisions taken already how to reduce the population. And you know, it's I don't want to list the names, but there is a special strategy to reduce the population.
We were talking about several decades ago, or now?
Yes, now, currently,
Oh.
at the moment. Да, именно сейчас.
I'm not aware of such a group that are trying to reduce population. I know I get letters from environmentalists, and because with my professional training, we knew what was going to happen in China. Not at this low birth rate, but we knew the birth rate was already low in the 1990s, and China's population would decline eventually. And so we urged the government, advised government to end the one-child policy, which was not necessary and which was harmful. So I get letters from Northern European environmentalists to say, isn't it a wonderful thing that China is having a one-child policy and reducing the population, reducing the burden, environmental burden for the world? Why are you supporting this? So I get letters like that, but I'm not aware of population, the group of people who try to reduce population. But 45, 50 years ago, yes. Rockefeller Foundation, a lot of the American, the big foundations, they all supported birth control and spent a lot of money. I don't say that's a conspiracy because they were really concerned about this. And that was disproportionately in developing countries because that's where population growth was fast. What's the opposite, though, is look at the technocrats, look at the oligarchs in the United States. They are pushing for more birth. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, I think has 3 or 4 and just announced another one. It's on the way, right? And you have Elon Musk, who I don't know how he does this. He has like over a dozen children and who wants to send people to Mars. So what I see is rich people now are business people, elites, are pushing for more babies. And I think they are in the same camp as those people who thought we should only look at publishing sites. So that is a 20th century mentality, but it's still prevalent today. So that's the opposite of what you raised. Okay.
Спасибо большое. У нас, к сожалению, подошло время к концу. Давайте еще раз поблагодарим профессора Ван Фена. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.